Hi, this is Dario Nardi, and thank you for joining the British APT April virtual conference. I'm sorry that I cannot be here live. I am sleeping, most likely, hopefully. Um, and I had to change travel plans, unfortunately, for some family events, but I still wanted to share with you the topic for today, which is AI and type. The future is now. So let's pop up our presentation, and I'm hoping that we will have a chance to share as you go along. And if you have questions, please email me and let me know. I am passionate about this in great part because I worked in AI from my dissertation days back in the late 90s through the early 2000s, and thought at the time, gosh, it will be another 20 years before the topic gets interesting. And lo and behold, it's 2024, and the topic has finally gotten interesting. So much so that you've likely heard about it, even if you haven't used AI. And where it is today is certainly groundbreaking compared to just, say, 5 years ago. And of course, our topic is type, and we want to know how does that impact type. So I've already led one workshop of folks through Personality Hacker. Thank you very much, Joel and Antonia, and the group of 8 students last November learning about type and AI, as well as brain imaging and simulation-based learning with type in mind, and a whole variety of futuristic topics. So without further ado, let us jump into it. What are we going to talk about today? Well, there's only so much time, and it really could be a whole course. So I'm just going to say a little bit about how today's AI works. And I think that's very important because for folks who are not sure, that there can be some real misunderstandings, like why is it responding this way or that way? Like, why didn't it know this particular fact? Also, looking really mostly what we're going to be doing is what can the AI do? So offering definitions and ideas around type. And we're talking mainly about large language models. I'll get into that. So basically you sitting and having a dialogue. Um, and there are other forms of AI. We'll touch at that at the very end, but we're just going to focus on this one for now because so much of the type materials have been and are still text-based or speaking-based. I believe that's going to change. There's going to be more simulation-based learning. There's going to be type films and animations and that kind of thing. It will be the younger generations to really run with this for the most part. So what else can AI do besides offering some definitions? It can generalize based on material that we give it. It can also create personalized materials, including cases, case studies, and stories. It can engage users in a process. So this may be a surprise. You can actually set up a process like, can you help me locate my best fit type? Also analyzing, let's say you've gathered data set of interviews from people or notes you have from clients, or something that a client has sent you, you can ask it to analyze. AI is quite good at that, especially in terms of type and also the Enneagram and some other models. And then, like I said, there are other forms of AI, and just in general, I think it's important to be aware of what the future holds because it's arriving really quickly. Even what I'm going to show you today, the interface today, most likely 1 year from now, it will be far more natural than the back and forth texting that we have. So let's see if we can do this in 45 or 50 minutes, and because I want to allow you all to have some discussion time too. And thank you, Nicholas Toko, for facilitating this, as I cannot be there. So let's start with a poll, speaking of interactive, and how many of us humans are using AI? Yeah, so you may have heard about it, but are you using it? So 3 options here. You are using it in some way, whatever way that is, not necessarily text. You've taken a quick look. Like maybe you saw some YouTube videos around it, you downloaded something, you got a subscription for a little while, played around with it, whatever it is. And then the other one is not yet, including what is this AI thing and why all of a sudden it's happening. It really is like I'm going to say like a big explosion on the scene. technology-wise and in terms of social impact. And I don't know if it's equivalent to say, at the end of World War II and coming into the post-war era and this idea of nuclear energy and nuclear bombs and the both threats and benefits. Um, I don't know if it's quite that, but it may actually be even more groundbreaking in many ways. But it really is exploding on the scene. So just a show of hands and see how that is. And I guess you all can pause this video and then return. So how does today's AI work? We're going to focus on what's called LLMs, or large language models. There are other ways to do AI, such as for crafting illustrations. We're not going to talk about those, but do know that they're there, and they're also cool and powerful, and certainly threats to the way things have been done. One important thing to understand is AI is not like accessing a giant crisp database with a whole bunch of detailed information using some kind of language interface. Okay, that's not what it is. So it's not like you can type in something very obscure and it's going to know. It's not how it works. Instead, it's a giant web of billions of associations, statistical associations. So if something comes up often enough on the internet, typically, or in books, which are primarily what most of the AIs have been raised on, then it's going to form associations, and it's going to know about it. It may not know it 100% accurately, but it will be able to really think in this terms of associations. And in fact, the way you interact with it, the language that you use, feeds directly into its associative way of thinking. So it's sort of organic as opposed to mechanical. So please do not think of it as having crisp, detailed knowledge. Like I said, the associations are weighted based on likelihood that they go together. Although we can also work around that by using metaphors, for example, to get it to think outside the box. So they're more like humans than, say, an office, something mechanical would be, but they're also not quite human at the same time. They're trained on huge amounts of internet web data, including books and forums like Reddit, for example. And generally, the bigger and richer the AI's internal web of associations, the smarter the AI is going to be. That's not necessarily so. There is a certain amount of, I understand, handcrafting and you say craftsmanship that goes into it, some like tactical choices that are made. And there's a variety of language AIs out there, sort of chat AIs, and not all of them are equal. We're mainly going to talk about ChatGPT 4, version 3.5, and 4. 4 is the pro version you got to pay for. We could also talk about Claude 3. Claude 3 is actually exceeded ChatGPT 4, but it's sort of a neck and neck race, and I'm not as familiar with it. So some other things to understand. There are clusters and layers of associations. So there are associations between associations and so on. So it's not just like feeding in a few words and then it goes through this like two-dimensional web and comes up with some stuff. This web is many, many, many dimensions. And this is how it has this dynamic understanding, is that there are many different kinds of associations, layers of associations. There's also an element of randomness. I understand that at least at OpenAI, which is the company that created ChatGPT, that they follow the classic engineering 80-20 rule. So it's 80% associations that are trained into the AI and 20% random. That's why when you type in stuff, you will get variations. It's not so random that it will be weird, but you get variations out there. There's also a separate module that was used to guide its outputs. And that's where some of the differences will be. Some people, for example, have criticized Google's AI, which is actually not very good at this point. They're like a generation or two behind. But the training module that they use, or the filters they use, also, that seems like that's a big part of it. Important to know, it can engage in a process. So any kind of conversation. So an interview is conducting interviews, a kind of process. Writing a story is a process. Explaining something step by step. Engaging in reasoning, especially if you ask it to actually lay out its reasoning for, say, a legal case or a math problem. Um, it does have limited working memory. So you can't, if for the most part, I believe as of now, maybe a year from now, you can feed it, say, a whole novel and ask it to summarize the novel. You can't do that. You could feed it a chapter, or most likely like 2 or 3 pages is a very good, easy thing to do. But let's say a book chapter, and that it can work with. I imagine as time goes on, its working memory will become better. Of course, humans can hold many, many books in mind, for example, or films or whatever it is. So one of its big limitations is working memory. More recent versions outperform the earlier ones, and future versions will certainly do even better. I'm going to end the day by giving this quote that I know is not from me, but is a really great quote. The AI as it is now is the worst that it will ever be, which means that it will only be getting better. With regard to type, I think that can also improve. And if some people wonder, oh, I'll just download the free thing and play around with it. So the free one, ChatGPT, is 3.5, and it actually does make mistakes with type, and it is not really that great. And I just want to let you know, like, it is worth it to pay for 1 month subscription of the version 4 to actually get something that, for example, really understands the function stack, the function hierarchy, for example. Another little thing, which is sort of on the side, which maybe is not mentioned so much, is every query that you make with an AI costs 25 cents of energy. At least that's how it is now. So that may not seem that much, but of course, tens of thousands or millions of people making even dozens of queries each day adds up to a lot of money and a lot of energy. So that's another way. Human brains are very efficient, and AI brains are not. So that may be something that helps us preserve our jobs in the future. And I think we all have jobs anyways. We're just going to be AI managers, well, at least for the next generation. After that, I don't know, we're going to have the 1960s all over again, except it will be about robot rights. And AI is taking all of our jobs for real. But we don't have to worry about that today. We're just doing AI and type as it is now. So it just show you a little bit of the ChatGPT interface. It's a very standard internet interface. On the left-hand side is a panel with the list of threads. So basically different ongoing conversations that you're having or tasks that you've given it. And then there's a little introductory page, but once you type in your first message, assuming that's part of a new chat, it's going to then start a new task. And what you tell it at the beginning is important. You know, just like when, say, you're giving a workshop, how you preface it at the beginning and how you frame it is important. So framing is something that you want to think about just as you would with a human being. And what else do we need to know? Well, every time you have an interaction with it, there's a cute little set of icons that you can do things like, oh, wow, this output was really good. I want to copy this to the clipboard and use it somewhere. Or, you know, this response that it gave wasn't really that great. And why don't I ask it to just take a different approach? So you can ask it to regenerate a new response. There's also like a thumbs up kind of thing or thumbs down to indicate, you know, how was this? Because that's like a nodding your head or like shaking your head. No, that's not really working. And that also helps guide the AI as you work through it. And I imagine the interface, I don't have to imagine, OpenAI has said, for example, that within the year that there should be a video and voice interface, not just text on the computer screen. But this is how it is. And there's just sort of a running dialogue back and forth as if you were text messaging, except the messages can be very short or they can be quite long as you decide. There is a limitation. Generally, you want to limit it to a few hundred words, but or maybe like a page and a half of material, something like that. I say something like that because there's a deeper logic. There's something called tokens, but we're not going to talk about that today. So what are some things that it can do? One really interesting thing is because the because AI is trained on what's on the internet and books that are out there, I mean, as many books as they could get their hands on, that AI comes knowing about type, including type dynamics and type development. So if you talk about Isabel Myers or David Kiersey, Carl Jung, you mentioned like you could ask it what types have introverted sensing in the ranked third or in the tertiary position. And as long as you've given it some clue that you're talking about type at the beginning, that it's going to know what those types are. So it comes knowing. And then this is a really cool thing because the AI works off of a composite. Basically, this, like, as I said, this web of associations, it's a composite of what everyone thinks on the internet. And so it tends to ignore or literally does not even know about the kookier ideas that are out there. It's basically, it knows the center point of type. It also knows some side theories that are more popular theories that are out there. But that doesn't mean that its understanding is great, but it also means that the version of type you get is going to be, it's going to be familiar to pretty much everybody, whether they're a trained professional or just sort of somebody randomly out there with an interest in type. I should also mention that there are some widespread biases in type. At least I think that there are some biases. Some of them come in the form sort of earlier on, for example, where sensing was described in a more simple passive way, such as taking in information through the five senses. And then intuiting was described in a more advanced, sophisticated way as being able to notice patterns and associations and make inferences and so on, use imagination. And well, everybody uses imagination. But Jung talked about an active, sophisticated version of sensing, and there also is a simplistic version of intuiting. Similarly, sometimes extroverted feeling is described in a very touchy-feely way, or most of the material on the internet describes NI as very future-oriented, and it tends to miss the nuances or sort of key facets. So I, for example, see one side of introverted intuiting, very sort of yang side, as being future-oriented and driven, having a vision and latching onto that and going for it. But there's also another version of AI that Jung focused on, because he didn't actually focus on the future part. He was more about the connection with dreams and the unconscious and aesthetics. And there is this other sort of yin version of NI that's also there. So at times you actually will need to, frame the NI's experience with the beginning, sort of pre-inform it with materials to let it know, like, hey, I know you know about type, but let's make sure we have a non-biased approach, or like as wide a blanket as we can get. I think so. That's why I say, like, when working with the AI and type, start with some materials that present a balanced professional picture of type, and you can tell it, like, please, behave in a professional manner following, say, APA guidelines or ethics guidelines or whatnot. We'll know those things, and if not, then you'll notice very quickly, and you can inform it of such. I would also say that whenever you're working with a specific type, let's say you start a task that is just about INFPs, that you really want to preface it, you want to frame the experience, inform it with all the facets of type. Like, it can sort of know these things. Again, it knows about Kiersian temperament and Barron's interaction styles. I think it does. But you can, in fact, give it a holistic profile of INFPs. And mention what are the preferences, the four-letter preference. Give it the stack, the 4-function or 8-function stack. Give it a description of the NF sort of catalyst idealist temperament and its interaction styles behind the scenes. INFP is part of the alpha, beta, gamma, delta quadra, and from socionics. So, you can even put in developmental levels. And if you're not sure where those are, go ask Roger Pearman, because he did a whole lot of work on looking at developmental levels. And of course, case studies and examples of INFPs you could load it with as well. So these are extra steps, even though it comes knowing a lot about type. At the very least, you want to ask it, to focus its attention on those things, and better yet, provide it with materials. that you have available. It's like just as you're starting your test, it's sort of like starting a project. You want to gather all the materials that are needed in order to do a good job with the project. Okay. Yeah. So what are some basic type inquiries that we can make? Please tell me in a paragraph, who is Isabel Myers of MBTI fame? Please generate a 2-page introduction to Carl Jung's work on introversion extroversion. Be sure to give examples and remember that Jung described people as falling along a spectrum of bias or preference. So notice it, we can give it caveats. It really is like talking to a person, I would say, in the sense of like a subordinate or an intern, somebody who has knowledge, but they may not necessarily know that they have knowledge, or they can't maybe use it in an expert way completely. So you need to really let it know what it is that you want. Please explain the 4-letter Myers-Briggs personality type code. Yeah, that's a very broad statement, but okay, now you see how it does, and he says, please explain again, but this time use simpler language suited to children ages 7 to 10. And it absolutely can do that. How neat is that? So maybe if you have some type materials that you've created yourself and you want to make something available to kids, just ask the AI to write that for you. You can ask it, what is the function stack for INTP? And then briefly describe how each function plays out for INTPs, stereotypically, of course. Imagine an ENTP named Ned and an INFP named Clara who are in a romantic relationship. Using the Myers-Briggs and Jungian models, what kinds of challenges will the couple face in terms of communication? Yes, it's going to generate like a page and a half. If you want less than that, you need to tell it that. Like, do this all in one paragraph. But typically, it will say what it can say and use up the space that is available to it. So that's really cool. You can learn about that right there. This next one is very long, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. But it's essentially you're giving an example of what you might do to explain different facets of introverted sensing. And you know, you mentioned Jung a little bit and you give a few examples. It's nice, like give it some examples. And then you ask it, please explain how Jung's definition of SI leads to the different facets people talk about today. Yes, it can do that too, because it has a sense of, well, Jung was 100 years ago, and then there is more current information. And then you could just say my type preferences are, whatever they are, say ENFP, which type is best for me for a romantic relationship. Of course, that's a loaded question. We really should give a lot more information than that. And of course, type is actually not a determiner of a quote best romantic relationship, but you might wonder how it will respond. Without much more, it's just going to give some examples of what could work and what's known generally on the internet, what people say, and then it will end its reply with a caveat. Usually saying, remember, this is a theory, and you know, every individual is different. So there is a certain amount with ChatGPT, at least, that when it gives a response, it gives like a topic sentence or topic paragraph. It generates everything you ask for, and then it ends it with a summary and usually caveats as well. Like, remember, there's another side to this argument, kind of thing. And then this is this is a cute statement. Please act as a Jungian depth psychologist and fully explain with examples the concept of shadow. So if you just said, explain the concept of shadow, it doesn't have a lot of references to work from. It's just going to give you like a blip from the internet. But when you ask it to act as a Jungian depth psychologist, it's going to search its web of associations until it lands in the domain of Jungian psychology, and is also going to think about and bring in the associations for being a psychologist. And you ask it to fully explain, and you ask it to include examples, then it's going to do that. If you didn't mention including examples, it may not give examples at all. So again, it can't read your mind. It's actually smarter than it looks. It's just that the queries need to be interesting. The prompts, as we call it, the prompts for the AI. There's a lot more we could say that's not going to fit in an hour, so I'm just going to give some general examples here. And you all can also look at the slide deck later to see like some specific wordings that you could use. So one cool thing is that it can generate personalized materials. So let's say you have a set of profiles, and the type profiles, especially the ones, I mean, even ones written within the past 5 or 10 years, tend to be specific to American culture. And I know Europeans, for example, I've heard this a couple of times, complained that, for example, a type like ESFP sounds very American. And it's like the European ESFPs are a little bit different. So how could we adapt it to a different culture? Or what about a specific career? What about, gender plays a role. People encounter different issues. I mean, we're sort of known, for example, male feeling types and female thinking types. You can also ask for type specific action plans. Um, Remember Suzanne Brew's a book on the 8 colors of fitness, and how she gave fitness advice and plans for each of the types around their dominant function. You can ask it to generate something like that. It is not going to be as thorough and probably as on point as Suzanne's book would be, but it is certainly going to give sensible information, and if you prompt it well, it really can be quite on. And then bullet pointed insights or predictions for types in particular situations. I mean, it could also be text insights. I just say it generally, when you ask it for a number of things, like can you just give me a bunch of insights or predictions? It's going to bullet point those. So there's lots and lots of possibilities. And I'm just going to mention, one or two of the examples here. So you can give it a portrait, for example, of the ENTP. This is actually the very first thing I did over a year ago. I gave it an ENTP snapshot that was very general, and I said, please write 1-paragraph portrait about ENTPs who work as managers in the oil and gas industry. Mention strengths, blind spots, and likely contributions. And it wrote actually a really lovely profile about ENTPs based on the one I gave it, but specific to the oil and gas industry for people who are managers. How nice is that, right? For your clients, to be able to say, hey, besides these general type descriptions, here are some short snapshots that are specific to your industry and role that you're in. And you don't need to sit down and be like, oh my God, I have to write these myself. And are they going to be good? And are they going to be biased in some ways? ChatGPT knows all about the oil and gas industry, and it knows about managers. So by saying these words, you're directing its attention to multiple places in its web of associations, and it's going to bring those together and weave those together, and also mention the strengths and blind spots and contributions because you asked it to. And that's a very nice thing. The last one here, use this bullet pointed list below. In other words, you give it a list to generate a 2-page popular psychology magazine article that gives life advice for ISTJs. Very briefly define the 4-letter code, be sure to give some examples, and keep the tone light and fun. It will absolutely do this, and it does a good job. Is depth as nuanced as maybe a type professional can do? Probably not. Will you need to make some tweaks? I would say in all of these, to the ENTP portrait, I did actually change one sentence, and I added one sentence, because this knowledge of ENTPs is, it's generalized. Sort of composite knowledge of ENTPs misses some nuances that, as a type professional like all of you, I know these things a little bit better than it does. But it absolutely can write this popular article. And so if you want to put something on LinkedIn or a series of things, or maybe, I don't know, create a booklet, ChatGPT can do that for you. A Claude 3 can probably do that for you too. Engaging users in a process. So here is another example. And yeah, it's you or your client, and it's with the AI. And I'm not going to go through all of these. These are for you to look at if you want. They're called requests or prompts. And one example is helping the user locate their best fit type. So this becomes another kind of data point. There's like taking an assessment, or there's actually several different assessments. There's like in-depth reflection. They're sitting with the facilitator and going through. And there are different models also give different data points, like temperament plus interaction styles plus the 8 cognitive processes together. And so this becomes like another data point, which is, what did the AI think? And there's a very nice prompt that someone crafted on Facebook, which I have duplicated here. And it's very important, by the way, that it be done with version 4 of ChatGPT, because 3.5 will probably give you the wrong type. Yeah, it gets better, it gets smarter over time. Another thing that we can do is simulate a coaching session. You might think like, oh my God, it's going to take my job. No, don't worry about that. First of all, you as the coach can sit there as if you're the client and run through the AI, and it's going to give you ideas for then what to actually talk about in person without the AI with your client. Again, I think the great way to think of AI is like an elf or a gnome. It's there to give you ideas. The little magic elf whispering in your ear. So some things that you can do. This is a fairly complex one, because I wanted to feed it a specific coaching model that is not just like a linear, general, like, oh, like give coaching advice for ISTJs. And then that's it. No. This is a specific model that follows the function stack and works in a certain way, and it has example questions. And I just ask it, now I want you to engage in a multi-step process. You play the role of a life coach, and I am your client. Please start by welcoming me and asking me to state a problem I'm facing. Then ask me a series of questions as described above using the PDF, because you can tell ChatGPT to look at PDFs, and following the function stack as best you can. Be sure to adapt how you word the questions to match the problem I am facing. And this is very nice. It can, and you can even give it a little bit more, like how to wrap up the conversation, how to know when success is achieved. It can even track its own process. You can even say, like, until we reach a 90% client satisfaction, and it will figure out on its own how to reach a 90% satisfaction rate. You don't need to give it like a rubric for grading the interaction. It already has rubrics in mind. And then another kind of process is to simulate a lunch date with the type. So I decided right away at the beginning I was going to try this out with an ESTP, because it's a type very different from mine. But we still have like some type dynamics, like some functions in common. And this is also, it's like a 1-paragraph response, and it's back and forth, and you go on a lunch date. Is it ready for film? No. And you can give it caveats. You can, say beyond the type, like, is this like, what is this person's culture, social class, gender? Give them a name. You can actually give them a story, like a chapter from a novel that contains like a really classic example of an ESTP or whatever type. You can even use one of my teaching tales in order to feed it to ChatGPT, and then it will be that person, say Tim or Andrea, and it will have life events and all of that it can talk about, and it does all the work for you. You just got to write the prompt in a smart way. So what are some other things that we can do? The third big piece out of the 3, I know it says 5 here. We have like 7 or 8 points today, but the 3 big applications, the third application, this one is analyzing profiles and data sets. And we can all become type researchers. Yes, we can. In fact, I really encourage you to become a type researcher, but that doesn't mean you have to magically dedicate, like find time and dedicate yourself to doing a whole bunch of statistical analysis and this and that. You can do that. Don't want to discourage that. But we can use AI to help analyze data and or refine our understanding of type. So let's say that I do an interview with not just one person. I could do with one person, and then say it's a 1-hour interview that's conducive, that elicits answers that will point to type. If it's an interview that's not so type oriented, it's going to be harder. And then you ask it to analyze using several different type models, like a preferences, 8 functions, temperament, interaction styles, quadra, and then sort of you can ask it first report what themes you hear in the interview, and then based on the knowledge of type, what on a scale of like 0 to 100%, like name 3 types that are most likely and give a confidence percentage for each of those. We could just ask it to pick one type, but I think, say it a little bit more sophisticated way. You can feed it interviews of 4 people or 40 people. Well, 40 people is a big stretch because its working memory is not so great. But you can also look for things like, what are the favorite words and phrases or the ideas that the people mention, or that these 4 people, say 4 ISTJs, have in common. And then you could ask them also, like, what subtype do each of these fit into? And even please act as a life coach and generate lists of suggestions for the person based on their interview, and maybe some advice document that you have that reflects like how you do coaching. Is really, I mean, it can act as a life coach without any reference, but I really suggest that you impart it with some of your own wisdom. You can also do more complex analysis. And one of them, I think, which is really good, is, let's say you're writing type descriptions, or you're writing some articles about different types, and you're afraid that, or thinking like, maybe there's some bias here, like maybe I don't like INFJs, so somehow that's going to come through as very negative, and I don't want that. So you can ask it to do a sentiment analysis, like what is the balance in each of these of negative versus positive statements, and please like highlight the ones that are excessively negative or positive. You can ask it to give a score for each of the articles or profiles, and then it's going to report back. And then you can be like, oh wow, no, actually the INFJ one had a lot of praise in it, I didn't realize, and the INTP one is the one that I was negative about. Now report how fairly and fully each of the 4 descriptions or whatever portrays that type's function stack. Yeah, so let's say that you're doing an article, or maybe putting out like a coaching plan for a particular client. It's a particular type, and you want to know, like, did I address the whole function stack? So that's really nice. And by the way, you don't need to limit yourself to type. You can reference the Enneagram, including its wing and instinct. In my experience, it does Enneagram very well. I would say as well, or perhaps even better than the 16 types. And you can ask it to explain its reasoning for that as well, and even offer like a secondary Enneagram type. You can also ask it to analyze using other models like Kohlberg stages of moral development or feminist theory. And I've done all of these and found some models that can do better than others. Kohlberg stages of moral development is one that it does very well, by the way. But yeah, if you're worried about gender bias or maybe ethnic bias or cultural bias, you can ask it to comment on something that you've written and then come back and give suggestions to provide something, as to say, more balanced in terms of like even social class. Many type descriptions, the reading level is like way too high. Like, why is there everything written in type for like college level reading? You can ask it to take what I wrote and like simplify it down to 8th grade reading level. So that's like ages, like 14 or something. And it can do that too. How you frame that and what you give it, it may not always be immediately successful. You may need to try a couple of different angles. Put on your ISTP hat or INTP hat for finding different angles and different wording. The beauty of having good wording. I think if AI had a type, its type, it would be an IJ type, because it has this massive unconscious database that it draws from, and then it has a user interface that it behaves in a very linear way. So that's, maybe it's not an IP type. But if you are an IP type, you might find this very complementary and enjoy the process of like getting as much out of it as you can with the right wording or the right values. and really just sort of contemplating that. Other forms of AI as we wrap up. There are illustrations. AI can make gorgeous illustrations. I'm going to show an example in a minute. It can create virtual characters. You can create a self-replicant. I did this, by the way. I'm going to talk about this in a moment. Scary, amazing, good. Is it as animated with hand gestures as I am? No, not quite, but it's really quite good. And then there's also animation and video, which is coming. The future of type can be an animation and video. You could even ask it to create an animation that say tells the story of sensing versus intuiting or something like that. I'm not sure that the current AIs are quite up to that yet. Don't worry, animators, you're not out of business. You still need to manage and use the tools, but some very cool stuff. So let me talk about two of them. HeyGen is one. It allows you to upload a short video of yourself, ideally 2 minutes. And it has some specifications, like you want to be from like the chest up, and you want to pause between each sentence that you use, and keep some eye contact, but you follow those, and you could also, by the way, just select one of their existing human models that they have, and then you tell it what to say. Like you just type in a box, like this is what I want me to say, or I want this person to say. And the result is a photorealistic video. It's not an animation, it's a photorealistic video of you or a model, one of the models you select speaking, and you can do this even in a foreign language. So if you have a Spanish audience and your Spanish is very rusty, you can upload a 2-minute video of yourself speaking in English, or ideally like try and do it in Spanish. And then after that, just type in what you want it to say. And it can create a whole like 10-minute video of you, which by the way, will not be cheap, but you can, and then you don't, wow, like what a marketing tool, but also a way to reach people you wouldn't normally reach who don't have, for example, have English available. Or maybe you just don't have like the whole lighting and sound environment, the equipment in order to make a cool video. So last thing, example is Midjourney. I've also used Midjourney a little bit to generate type-related visual images. These are static images, but animation and video are coming. Please still hire an art director. I say that again. And here's two. I gave it instructions. I gave it one-line instructions that asked it to draw a young male like with a particular type code, and like a tiny bit more of information. The one on the left was for an office environment, and the one on the right was from a home environment with the dog. The office environment also needed to have windows and like a background. But that's all I said. It was all in one sentence. And it generated these images. And then just looking at these, because I told it the type, but can you guess what type I asked it for? And it will give you 4 options, Midjourney, and then one of them will be like the one you like the most or is the closest. And then you can say, hey, I like this one the most. Now you generate like 4 like more options based on what you did here, or can you just refine the picture quality or make some small change to it, whatever it is. I'll tell you, I know you might want to debate, but the one on the left is INTJ and the one on the right is an ENFP. I think it did a great job, and those are just, you're like, how did it do this? It knows, Midjourney knows type as well. Different AI than ChatGPT, but it also knows type. What the future holds right now is the worst that AI will ever be, and it's going to keep exploding. And I'd like you to think, before you all sort of get into discussion, what's one big idea or insight from today's conversations with AI? I know I went by really fast. There's a lot to say. It's just huge, the number of different possible applications. I know those of you with extroverted intuiting are like, oh my God, there's like 100 more things that have come to mind. But just try and pick one, like one big idea. And if I would say anything, it's again that it's a really great assistant to working with type. And thank goodness it comes with knowledge of type that, as far as I can tell, actually has fairly low. It has incompleteness. It has bias in the sense that it's not like deliberate nasty bias. It's just like the way type has tended to be talked about over the past few decades, seeped in there. But it definitely has more than like preference-based simplistic thinking. That's something that came out for me as an insight. And then the other is that it's just a really great assistant. So please email me your thoughts and questions. And I can't guarantee when I'm going to get back with those. I might actually just collect all of them and record another video and then make that available as well. That's probably the easiest thing to do. And then about me, it says instructor because I'm teaching a class on this, but yeah, the little speaker for today. So please, all of you now go and enjoy a discussion with each other. And I'm very excited to hear what all came up. Thank you very much. And I hope to see you or a simulation of you or one of your AIs working with type in the future. Thank you.